Hello, dear viewers! Welcome to the fourth episode of the series, The Ledger. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss a single episode of this series in which the victims are cursed and turned into animals. You can also support us by liking the video and leaving your lovely comments. Enjoy the show!
Of all the small hungers I collect, envy is the quietest and the most corrosive. The vain want to be admired, the greedy want to possess. But the envious want something stranger and sadder. They want to be someone else entirely. They stand at the edge of every room measuring their own life against the lives around them and finding it wanting, always wanting. Tonight my candle burns beside my open spine and my ink is stirring, because a woman who has never once been content to be herself is about to get her wish. She will become everyone, which is to say, no one. This is entry number 4. Her name was Priya Vance, and she had spent 27 years wanting to be other people. Not in the ordinary way we all sometimes do. Priya's envy was a full-time occupation. She studied the women more admired than her the way a scholar studies a text, their laughs, their clothes, their easy belonging, the way rooms opened for them. She copied what she could and resented what she couldn't, and beneath every smile she wore was the same silent ache, why her and not me? She had clawed her way onto the guest list of the season's most glittering gala, and she stood now at its bright and shining edge, watching everyone, wanting to be anyone but herself. The ballroom was a cathedral of mirrors and chandeliers, marble underfoot, the air thick with perfume and laughter that always seemed to belong to someone else. Near the entrance, on a marble pedestal, lay the evening's guestbook, an old and beautiful thing, leather-bound, its pages edged in gold. A signature, the hostess had said, for posterity. Priya's heart leapt at the word, posterity, belonging, proof that she too had been here, among the admired. She bent eagerly to the book and took up the pen, thrilled beyond reason simply to be asked. She did not read the line embossed at the top of the page. They never do. The line said, "For those who long to be someone else." She signed her name with an eager, hopeful flourish, the name she had never much liked, attached to the life she had never much wanted, and the ink did a curious thing. It flared gold beneath her hand, then sank into the page, drawn down like water into thirsty sand, and a contract older than the mansion quietly closed. Priya felt nothing but the warm glow of belonging. She straightened, smoothed her emerald gown, and turned back to the party to do what she did best, to stand at its edge and envy every soul in it. She would not stand at any edge for much longer. It began beside a woman in a ruby-red gown, a woman who laughed easily, who was clearly, effortlessly admired, everything Priya wished to be. Priya looked at her with the old familiar ache, and as she looked, the strangest warmth spread across her bare arm. She glanced down and her breath caught. The skin of her arm and shoulder was flushing, shifting, deepening into the exact ruby red of the other woman's gown, smooth and faintly iridescent, as if she were being dipped in the colors she coveted. She should have been terrified. Instead, she was delighted. Here it was at last, the thing she'd always wanted, the power to be someone else. She thought it was a gift. I so rarely give gifts. She drifted through the party trying it on. Beside a woman draped in gold, her skin ran to warm shimmering gold. Beside a man in deep sapphire, she flushed a rich cobalt blue. She found she could mirror not just their colors, but their postures, the tilt of a head, the arc of a laugh, and with each one she felt a giddy, intoxicating relief, the relief of not having to be Priya Vance. She flickered from guest to guest, borrowing a little of each, a magpie of other people's lives, and for a few shining minutes, she was happier than she had ever been. She had spent her whole life wanting to be anyone else. Now it seemed she could be all of them. She did not yet notice that she was becoming none of herself. The change reached her eyes without warning. In the mirrored wall, she caught her own face and froze. Her warm brown eyes were bulging slowly outward onto small rotating cones, turning a flat amber, and she gasped, beginning to move independently. One drifting left while the other rolled right, each swiveling on its own like the turret eyes of a chameleon. She could see two halves of the room at once and focus on neither. She clapped a hand over one eye, then the other, but they would not obey her, would not point together, would not simply look the way a person looks. Something cold, uncoiled in her stomach. This was not a gift. This was something taking her apart. She tried to stop. She stood very still in the center of that glittering room and told herself fiercely, "Be yourself. Just be yourself, and discovered she no longer knew how. Her skin flickered helplessly through the colors of everyone near her, ruby and gold and sapphire chasing each other across her arms, and she could not hold a single shade, could not find the one that was hers. Here is the first truth I have written beside every envious name in my collection. Envy is the art of being everyone except yourself practiced long enough. It is the only art you have left. Priya had spent so many years refusing to be Priya that when the moment came to simply be her, there was no longer any such person to become. Then the scales came, fine and granular. They spread across the backs of her flickering hands, up her arms, over her neck and shoulders, the pebbled skin of a chameleon still shifting through borrowed jewel tones, still unable to settle. Her emerald gown strained against her changing body. She scratched at the scales and only spread them faster, color rippling out from beneath her nails. Around her, the admired guests she had envied all night began, one by one, to turn away, drifting off to brighter corners, leaving her alone in the middle of the marble floor, the woman who had wanted so badly to be seen, becoming something no one wished to look at. And so she did the only thing she knew. She chased them. She turned from guest to guest, mirroring each in turn, ruby then gold, then sapphire, then emerald, a desperate smear of borrowed colors, trying to hold on to belonging by wearing everyone else's skin. But the faster she copied, the less of her remained. Each color she stole pushed her own further out of reach, until she was a blur of everyone in the room and nothing of herself at all. In the tall, gilded mirrors, a dozen mismatched Priyas flickered back at her, each a different stolen shade, not one of them the woman who had walked in. She had wanted to be everyone. She was succeeding. It was the loneliest success in the world. Her hands went next, and it grieved even me a little to watch. She held them up before her swiveling eyes and saw her elegant fingers begin to fuse not into paws, but into two opposed grasping bundles, like tongs, like pincers, the delicate, clever hands she had used to point and preen and copy, sealing into the blunt, gripping claws of a chameleon. Scales swallowed them, still shifting color. She tried to spread her fingers and could not, tried to hold anything and found she could only clamp. The hands that had reached out all her life for other people's lives could no longer even reach for her own. She stumbled into the ring of tall mirrors, and here is the second truth, the one every envious heart learns too late. You cannot covet a life and keep your own, the two will not fit in the same body. Priya stood surrounded by her own reflections, each one a different borrowed color, and reached a pincer hand toward the nearest, searching those flickering copies for the real her. There was no real her in the glass. There had not been for years. The gala had only made it visible. She had traded herself away one envious glance at a time, and now the ledger of it had simply come due, all at once, under the chandeliers. A ridged crest of bone began to rise from the back of her skull, pushing up through her long dark hair the tall casque of a chameleon, scales sweeping over her scalp around it. She touched it with a trembling pincer hand and felt the shape of the animal settling over the shape of the woman. Her skin never stopped shifting, ruby to gold to green, chasing the memory of colors that had already left the room. She was becoming, with terrible precision, exactly what she had always been on the inside, a creature with no color of its own, borrowing all its beauty from whatever it stood beside. Then, at the base of her spine, a long tail uncurled. It slid free of her tearing gown and coiled into a tight, elegant spiral, scaled and color-shifting like the rest of her, prehensile and searching. Her emerald satin, the one thing that had been her choice that evening, split along its seams and hung in ruins from her changing body. She looked back at the spiraling tail with both swiveling eyes and made a small, lost sound. Every borrowed thing she had draped over herself all her life was falling away, and beneath it there was only this, a shifting, scaled, colorless thing, wearing whatever the world happened to shine on it. She opened her mouth to call for help, and her tongue betrayed her. It had thickened and lengthened into the long, coiled, projectile tongue of a chameleon, and when she tried to form words, they came apart into a wet, clicking hiss, TK, TK, nothing a human ear could answer. She pressed a pincer hand to her mouth in horror. All her life she had used her voice to flatter, to copy, to echo other people's opinions back to them so they might like her. She had rarely once said anything that was only her own, and now she had no voice for it at all. There was nothing left to echo. The room had emptied. There was no one to be. Her legs finished it. Her feet reshaped into grasping chameleon feet, toes fusing into opposed pincer bundles, her elegant heels splitting apart on the marble. Scaled and color-shifting, she sank down off her human stance and found herself gripping, clinging, made now for perching rather than walking, for holding still and disappearing rather than striding into a room and being seen. She caught herself on the rail of a gilded chair and clung there, low and hunched, the last of the party's music fading around her. The woman who had lived to be noticed at the edge of every room had become a thing built above all else, to not be noticed at all. At last, in a lull of the emptying ballroom, she reared up before one tall gilded mirror and made both her swiveling eyes fix, for one moment on the same thing, her reflection. A chameleon looked back cast-crested, turret-eyed, scaled, her long dark hair the only human echo left, her skin caught mid-shift between a dozen colors that belonged to other people. She raised a pincer hand toward the glass, and the creature raised one too. She searched it, desperately, for a single shade that was hers, one color, one true thing, the essence of Priya Vance, beneath all the borrowing. She found none. There was nothing under the copied colors. There never had been. That was the whole tragedy, and she saw it finally, all at once. She curled into a quiet corner of the abandoned ballroom, pincer hands drawn in, tail wrapped around her, and fought me the way they all fight me with memory. But even her memories were borrowed. A laugh she'd copied from a college roommate, a way of standing she'd taken from a magazine, opinions she'd echoed to be liked. She reached down through all of it for the bedrock of herself, for the one Priya underneath, and her swiveling eyes searched and found only more reflections. I'm Priya Vance, she thought, and could not have said, if asked, what that meant. She had spent her only life becoming other people. There was no one home to save. The guests were gone now, the music dead, the great room empty, and here is the third truth, the one that waits at the bottom of every envious life. The envious vanish because they were never really there. With no one left to copy, no color left to steal, Priya's flickering skin drained slowly of every borrowed hue and settled at last into a pale, flat, colorless gray, the gray of the marble wall she pressed against. And as it did, she began, quite literally, to disappear. Her scaled body faded into the stone until only her dark hair and her two dim amber eyes remained, a ghost against the marble. She had wanted her whole life to be someone. She ended as the one thing she had always most feared invisible. By the time the caterers came to clear the glasses, the transformation was complete, and the creature clinging to the gilded chair rail in the empty ballroom was a chameleon in every scale and instinct crested, turret-eyed, its skin shifting faintly and hopelessly toward whatever it stood beside. The frantic envy had cooled into a still, watchful, waiting calm, the patience of a thing that survives by being overlooked. She perched motionless beneath the great dead chandelier where 100 admired guests had shone, and shone no light of her own, and reflected only the empty room. She was, in her way, perfectly adapted. She was, in every way that had ever mattered to her, gone. In the quiet of the emptied ballroom, my pages stirred and settled, and her entry dried upon them signature, flaw, payment, balance. I have collected the envious of every age, and I will tell you what I told each as they faded. I have never once taken anything that was not freely offered. She longed in writing to be someone else. She had been trading herself away her whole life. I merely completed the transaction. That is the entire art of it. You may find her still, if you look very hard in the grand hall by day, a pale, near-invisible shape clinging to a marble pillar, her amber eyes following the admired guests who stride past and never ever see the creature who wanted so badly to be them. Entry number 4, paid in full. But enough of her. My candle has been relit, and already my quill is moving on its own, because the ink chooses far faster than I can tell these tales. A fresh page, a new heading, drying in glowing ink. Entry number 5. The silhouette forming beneath it is a man, this time huge, furious, fists clenched, teeth bared, a man who has broken every room he ever walked into with the force of his own rage. His shadow has already begun to change. 2 thick horns curving up from his brow, a heavy humped neck, the low murderous stance of a bull about to charge. He has spent his life seeing red. Soon he will see nothing else. The ledger disagrees with him, and the ledger never runs out of pages.